Hi, I'm Professor Deepshika Agarwal, and I teach here in Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University in the law department here. And I have been working on the denotified tribes for the last 2 years. And I, along with my research scholars, have been doing empirical research on a denotified tribe called Perna, who indulge in prostitution, and our entire work is based upon this. Sulbha.
Hello everyone. My name is Sulbha Rai. I'm a PhD candidate in the University School of Humanities and Social Science, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University. I just submitted my final thesis, and my topic was the invisible children. A psychosocial mapping of lives of children of commercial sex workers. So the sex workers were from a DNT community, Perna, which lives in the periphery of Delhi, West Delhi, Nazafgarh. So we have made a small presentation on the various DNTs who are indulged in, where the women are indulged in the prostitution. So I would ask ma'am to take over from here, and she will be with the presentation, and then
Yeah,
this
so
latter part I'll be.
I think we can begin with the screen sharing and start the PPT. I'll share the screen to see. So we start with our presentation, and the title or the topic of our presentation is Negotiating Identities, the Woes of Sex Workers from DNT Communities of India. So this is the introduction where we are bringing in the common points that we are going to cover in our presentation. Basically, to introduce the topic, we can say that the denotified communities of the contemporary India carried the baggage of British legacy, where they were christened as criminal tribes on arbitrary basis. So basically, during the British period, certain communities, certain nomadic communities specifically, were picked up as criminal tribes, and they were forced into, wage labor. So their classification as criminal tribes threw them out of balance and pushed them to margins of society. The purpose of targeting these communities was to seek certain revenge from them. So as a result of this process of tagging them as criminal tribes, they lost their traditional occupations, which was more of street entertainment, and other kind of activities in which they indulged, which according to the British was not did not come into the category of work. And this happened because the British administration held certain prejudices against the nomadic tribes. Okay, so when India became independent and had its own constitution, in the post-independent India, the government made an attempt to remove the tag of criminal tribes and denotified them from the list of criminal tribes. However, this process of denotifying these, previous ex-criminal tribes has not removed the stigma from them, the stigma of bearing the tag of denotified tribes. And in the present context, they have been marginalized further. The process of marginalization has continued because the traditional occupations in which they indulged in the British period, these are gone in the present context also, uh, because of the change in approach and practices in the present context. So as they are forced to give up their traditional occupations, they are further pushed into going into wage work as laborers, because they don't have their traditional occupations functional as of now. And some of them have had to take up prostitution as their important means of livelihood. Now, these communities that took up prostitution faced dual stigma and became even more vulnerable. Dual stigma means that the one stigma that they bear is because of the tag of denotified tribes, which is fixed upon them, and the second is the indulgence in prostitution. So the mainstream communities do not accept the DNTs who indulge in prostitution. So because of this also they bear the stigma and they face the consequences. So this present study of ours highlights this unique form of prostitution that is not being run, let's say, in the brothels where the pimps are involved. Here we can say that prostitution becomes an act which is sanctioned by the entire community. So when we pick up one particular DNT which indulges in prostitution, here it is not just one individual or one family which is indulging in prostitution. The entire community sanctions prostitution, and we can say all the women in the various families of the community indulge in prostitution, or they are forced to go into prostitution as a means of livelihood. So, and because of this, we can say that a kind of subculture of prostitution, exists in these communities where we can say that prostitution is justified and is held as something, normal for these particular communities. So when the children grow up in such kind of, subculture, they accept prostitution as a normal thing. And when they grow up, they know that they also have to go into this profession. So that is what we are looking at. This is a unique form of prostitution because we have heard about intergenerational prostitution. But this form of prostitution, where it is sanctioned by the entire community, is unique to these DNTs. And the main purpose of this study is to bring the attention of the academicians and scholars to this unique form of prostitution, and through various discussions in academic at academic forum, we want to indulge into the deeper perspective of this area. So here we can see the keywords that we have used in this presentation is criminal tribes, which was a tag given by the British people to certain nomadic communities whom they wanted to target and use as forced labor. Then we are talking about the notified nomadic and semi-nomadic communities, which are basically DNTs. In the present context, the denotified communities term is used because that is the wider term. It covers more communities. Criminal Tribal Act refers to the act that was legislated by the British administration to curb the activities of the criminal tribes, so-called criminal tribes, and bring them in the mainstream. Itinerant communities refer to the nomadic communities who indulge in ambulatory practices and move from place to place. And there is a lot of stigma associated with these communities. Marginalization is a term where we say that these communities are pushed to periphery of the society where their identities are at stake. And prostitution obviously refers to commercial sex work. So the study which we have conducted is can be said to be exploratory because not much research work is available on this particular form of prostitution. So we are just exploring the features of community-based prostitution, so to say. So this study is exploratory. Apart from that, we are calling it descriptive because we have tried to look into the various salient features of prostitution in which these denotified tribes indulge. And we can say that our basic research work was done through doctrinal research, desk review, where the original information was gathered from National Archives of India. It houses the various original documents of the modern period, the various official documents of the British administration pertaining to the denotified tribes are kept here. So we have looked into these original documents. Apart from that, we have also looked at the various annual and interim reports of the National Commission of Denotified Nomadic and Semi-Nomadic Tribes. These commissions have been instituted at different points of time. For a certain period, there is no permanent national commission for these communities, but the reports are available, and the reports are uh, prepared on the basis of extensive studies in which various persons from different backgrounds are involved. Then we can also say that we have used the we have also referred to the various important ethnographies, though they are very very limited. At two or three ethnographies are there on the DNTs who have indulged in prostitution, but still they are good work. So we have looked upon these ethnographies, and apart from that, there are certain original research articles that have been reviewed for the purpose of this study. The study is primarily based upon empirical research, where fieldwork was conducted among the Perna community from Delhi. It is in one of the NCR regions, and it is, the Perna community is, in the neighborhood of the Perna community, there are certain other DNTs which are living, but they they don't indulge in prostitution. Only the Pedna community have taken up the vocation of prostitution, we can say. Then we can also say that the methodology that we have used here primarily is qualitative in nature, and the qualitative research methodology has been used because it imparts depth to the study and helps us in exploring the various aspects in more extensive manner, more intensive manner, we can say. And the purpose of this study is to highlight the condition of Perna during the pandemic. um, uh, you know um, for highlighting the condition of Perna during the pandemic, digital ethnography method has also been used, where we were unable to visit the field, and we wanted to know the condition of the Perna during pandemic. So we used telephone as the important, let's say, gadget to interview them and indulge in telephonic, conversations. So a lot of information regarding the condition of Perna during the pandemic has come through uh, telephonic interviews or telephonic conversations. Then, apart from the Perna, though Perna form the most important, community for the study, we have also taken up the act of prostitution in which other DNTs have indulged. So we have tried to look at them also. So here, very, very quickly, I will go through the history of the criminal tribes in India. Basically, we can say that the category of the criminal tribes or the cities was created by the British administration to fulfill their own political ambitions. They wanted to generate more revenue, and they saw that certain nomadic tribes are out of their control, so they tried to, target them as criminal tribes and restrict their movements and put them into criminal tribe settlements. And we can also say that the category was created by the British administration for the political gains. They wanted to curb the movement of these nomadic tribes and try to put them under surveillance and settle their scores, because some of these tribes were involved in the various revolutions and mutinies that were taking place around the end of 19th century. So this was the best way the British administration could control them. So that is one aspect. And it is noted that in the entire world, there are certain prejudices against the wandering or nomadic communities. It has been alleged that these communities have certain, physical features because of which they are targeted as what Lombroso called evolutionary throwbacks. Or though he used the term born criminal, the Britishers avoided using this term born criminal. Initially, they used the term, they used this concept of born criminal for the criminal tribes, but later they changed their approach. So we can say that the nomadic tribes, which have been studied by the, which have been handled by different governments the world over, they have certain prejudices because they feel that their physical development is more in comparison to their intellectual development as they move from place to place. So that is why their physical development takes place more, but their intellectual development is not there. And the physical features which have been assigned to these nomadic tribes fall in the category of the born criminals, which was the concept and the theory was laid down by Lombroso. Then, so we can say physical development is there, but lesser of intellectual and moral development is there. It is alleged that these nomadic tribes do not have any morals, and that is why they are said to be uncivilized. Now, these ideas associated with nomadic communities were used to create the stereotype of criminal tribes in British India. So the ideas about the nomadic tribes that we just discussed, that they are uncivilized, they are brutal, or they have low intellectual and moral development, these ideas were applied by the Britishers in Indian context. The Britishers also had their experience of handling nomadic tribes back home, where they analyzed the gypsies in their own country in a similar manner. But the only difference between the treatment of the gypsies in Britain was that here crime was treated at the individual level, whereas in the Indian context, when we talk about the criminal tribes, the tag of criminal was applied not to the individual but to the entire community, which had a lot of serious implications for the criminal tribes. Now, the idea of linking crime amongst the criminal tribe with social inheritance was there. Earlier, the British said that the criminality in the criminal tribes is due to the biological factors, but it is biologically inherited. But later, they changed their stance and they said that the criminality amongst the criminal tribes is more of inherited socially. So we can say that the criminal tribes pass on uh, the trait of criminality through their culture and not through the biological programming. So here, this approach of treating criminality among the criminal tribes from the social perspective gave them the chance, or gave them the reason, the ostensible reason of reclamation and reformation of the criminal tribes, by putting them into the criminal tribe settlements. So the approach, they took the logic. First, they created the category of the criminal tribes on an arbitrary basis. Then after that, with the aim of reforming these criminal tribes, they created these criminal tribe settlements, which were handled by police officers initially, but later, we can say that various Christian missionaries, for example, Salvation Army, was involved, to kind of reform them. So the criminal tribes were put into, the agricultural and industrial settlements, where they were forced into, wage labor and, what we can call hard work, to which, so to say, the criminal tribes were not used to. Now, here we can see that in context of the criminal tribes, the British administration, changed the definition of work, in the sense that they said they made the allegation basically and held the prejudices against the criminal tribes by saying that the criminal tribes indulge in casual and menial kind of activities which were not productive, let's say, for the British administration. Many of and the reasons for targeting the criminal tribes, as we have discussed earlier also, was that many tribes of the criminal tribe communities, many members of the criminal tribe communities had participated in 1857 mutiny, which was one of the most important revolution that had spread almost in the entire India. And there were other rebellions and revolts also in different parts of India, which were spearheaded by tribal communities falling in the category of criminal tribe. So in order to set score with these communities that participated in these mutinies and all, the government found it best way to tax these communities as criminal tribes and put them under surveillance. Basically, the ambulatory practices of these itinerant communities were regarded with suspicion because uh, when they were moving from place to place, they were out of control from the British administration and they could not be put in surveillance. So, we can say so here basically it was alleged that as these people, these itinerant communities move from place to place, they gather a lot of information about the physical layout of the places and different kind of resources available in these areas. So because of which knowledge base they used to manipulate the sedentary communities and maneuver their ways to usurp their property. So this was an allegation. This was a prejudice against the criminal tribes, and this was also an allegation made against the criminal tribes, and kind of justifying that they should be put under surveillance. So basically, a negative kind of relationship was seen between the itinerant communities and the sedentary communities. Further, the reason to put the tag of criminal tribe on these mobile or nomadic communities was that as they were moving from place to place, they could not be taxed and no revenue could be generated from them. During the end of the 19th century, we can say that the British administration was really looking forward to raise their revenue. So they found that by pushing the criminal tribes into forced wage labor, they could really increase their revenue. So this was one aspect. Then it was also alleged that the criminal tribes indulge in guerrilla warfare tactics because of which they could not be controlled. And apart from that, one reason which was pointed against the criminal tribes was that the traditional activities in which they indulge, like street entertainment, pulled a lot of crowd, which was considered with a lot of suspicion by the administration. So we have already discussed these prejudices that the British administration held against the itinerant communities. First of all, they alleged that these communities wander aimlessly from place to place, and they are their work, the work, traditional practices in which they indulged was not counted as work, and it was alleged that they are idle and lazy, and they do not indulge in any hard work. Then apart from that, the allegation was made, as we have seen in the earlier slides also, that they were uncivilized, they lack social norms and morals, and as a result of which there's a lot of disorganization in the society. Then the main point that was alleged was that they indulge in criminality as they don't have any sources of livelihood. So again, they live on the hard earnings of the other industries groups. These were the allegations that were made against the criminal tribes. Now, in order to control the activities of the criminal tribes, the Criminal Tribe Act was introduced, in different phases, and through which obviously the purpose was to politically, it was politically motivated to control the criminal tribes. We can say that the Criminal Tribe Act was against the wandering groups, nomads, hill and forest dwellers who were already marginalized, and their activities did not conform to the colonial pattern of settled agriculture and wage labor. So we can say that the British administration was looking for settled cultivation and wage labor, because this was the only way through which they could increase their revenue. They had forced many tribal communities, forest dwellers in the central India, where the communities that indulged in shifting cultivation were forced to indulge in settled cultivation and grow rice for the British administration. So basically, the British administration was forcing these communities to give up their traditional practices and fall in line with the colonial pattern of settled agriculture and wage labor. Then, we can say, apart from the Criminal Tribe Act, there were many other laws that were laid down by the British administration, which had adverse effect on these communities. For example, we can talk about, the forest policy, where the forest came, under the control of the British government, and the act of scientific forestry was introduced in forests to grow timber to feed the needs of the railways and other things. So this was one aspect. The forest land that belonged to the tribal communities, forest dwellers, was taken away from them, and it came under the control of the British administration. So this took away their basic livelihoods. So this is one way in which we can interpret how the laws of the British administration led to marginalization of the tribal communities, and it forced them to indulge in various kind of rebellions which took place from time to time in different parts of India during the British period. So we can say that apart from the forest dwellers, we can also talk about how the itinerant communities were pushed into marginalization and destitution, because because of these laws. We can say that the traditional sources of livelihood of the itinerant communities were also affected. For example, we can talk about salt trading legislations. The British government said that the trading of salt can only take place by certain individuals. So certain communities in Madras presidency, like the Koravas, they indulged in salt trading. They brought salt from the seashores, and kind of traded it in the communities, in the faraway communities which did not have access to salt. So salt was very important element of trading, and it was being taken up by the itinerant communities. The salt trading legislations worked against these communities and had impact on their traditional sources of livelihood. So whatever they traded in, that was taken up by the British administration, and it really forced the itinerant communities in the to further marginalization. Now here we can see how the British administration defined work. The definition of work was not uh, work was not exactly defined in terms of a technical perspective, but the British administration were more interested in what kind of work, on what nature of work did the nomadic or itinerant communities indulge in. So we can say that, as per the interpretation of the British administration, the itinerant communities did not they showed non-compliance to industrious and hard work. uh, and like the kind of traditional practices in which they indulged was collecting the forest goods like medicinal plants, raw material for craft work, etc. Then apart from that, they indulged in acrobatics. They were traditional musicians, and they indulged in street dancing and fortune telling. None of these activities fell in the category of work as per the British administration. These occupations were more or less independent. They were not time bound, and they did not, involve wage work, which again meant that the Britishers could not earn any revenue through this. Then, apart from this, we can say that these activities in which the criminal tribes indulged were seen as undesirable aspect of underclass that could be the Britishers felt that the criminal tribes could be trained to indulge in productive activities and help in raising the revenue of the government. So that's why, kind of new approach to work was taken, where the traditional activities of the tribal communities were replaced by forced wage labor. So the British administration tried to wean them away from unproductive and undesirable practices and forced them to work in government owned factories, mines and quarries, plantations, agricultural lands of high caste laborers, high caste landlords, and later they created the criminal tribe settlements, which were, as we discussed, earlier managed by the police administration, but later the administration of or the management of the city settlements was taken up by Christian missionaries, where the role of Salvation Army was very, very important. Salvation Army created a lot of criminal tribe settlements, and they raised their own revenue like anything. But they were said to be good managers of the criminal tribe settlements. The traditional practices and occupations of the criminal tribes thus became redundant during the British period, with times of rapid economic changes introduced by the British government. Now, if we talk about the situation of the criminal tribes in the present context, we can say that as India became independent, the tag of criminal tribe was removed, and all the criminal tribes that were notified under the list of criminal tribes during the British period, they were denotified. Their names were taken away from these lists, and they were denotified. But however, the change in nomenclature from a criminal tribe to denotified tribe had no meaning for these denotified tribes, as we can say that the prejudices that the British government held against the criminal tribes, it continues to plague the life of these DNTs even in the present context. We can say that the Criminal Tribe Act that was governing the criminal tribes during the British period was replaced by Habitual Offenders Act in the independent India. However, this change this change to Habitual Offenders Act did not again have any positive implication for the denotified tribes, because the various victimization sections of the Criminal Tribe Act have been, kind of retained in the Habitual Offenders Act. So even now, the DNTs continue to be treated by common people and administration with prejudices that were associated with them during the British period. So we can say that the common people still hold these denotified tribes with suspicion, and they feel that denotified tribes do indulge in criminal activities. Even the administration, we can say the police also feels that the DNTs continue to indulge in criminal activities. We can say that their traditional occupations are still seen with contempt, both by the common people and the government. And it has been seen that the government is making a lot of efforts to again wean them off from their traditional occupations and social institutions, and they have been trying to settle them in various colonies. Various kind of such attempts have been made in the different parts of India. So the situation remains more or less the same. This has resulted in loss of livelihood and their absorption in wage labor. So earlier we can say that during the British period, or when they indulged in their traditional occupations, they were more independent. But now what has happened is, since their traditional livelihood sources are gone, they are forced into wage labor. And in extreme cases, as the topic of our study is this, that in extreme cases, some of the DNTs are forced into intergenerational prostitution, where entire community indulges and supports commercial sex work. In-depth study of such communities is important, because we can say that when the government talks about the process of prostitution, they are mainly talking about the prostitution that is being run in the brothels, where the pimps are involved and the women are forced into prostitution. But here we can talk about the prostitution among the DNTs as a unique feature, where the entire community is involved, not one family, not one individual, but all the families from the entire community are forced into prostitution, or they indulge in prostitution. So we can say that through some good academic works, there are certain good academic works which have come up on uh, these communities which indulge in prostitution, but still the government is not aware of the existence of such practices or such communities. Hence we can say that the women of these communities continue to be exploited, and they get no respite from their deplorable situation. So here, from studying the context of prostitution among the, denotified tribes, we have taken a historical perspective, and we have tried to see that how these denotified communities continue to suffer in the present context, and to highlight community-based prostitution, we bring out certain case studies on Perna, Bedia, Rajnats, Kanjar, and Banchara. All these are denotified tribes. There are other denotified tribes also, but we have taken up the study of these five communities which have indulged in prostitution. And I would ask Sulbha Rai to take over from here and talk about some of these case studies. Pedna is the community where we have done our empirical research. But apart from that, we have also incorporated the case studies of other denotified tribes. Over to you, Sulbha.
Thank you, Professor Agarwal. You have explained the history very well of the DNTs. So now we'll discuss our cases. So the first case is Perna. The Pernas reside in and around Delhi, Rewari, Bulandshahr, and Rohtak. The Pena community is mostly scheduled under the scheduled caste list. And most of the women of this community practice ritually sanctioned prostitution as an occupation. We can say 95% of the women of this community, they are indulged into prostitution. While men of the community, like their husbands, they act as their pimps for these women. And some of them are also employed as seasonal workers in wedding band parties, security guards. They rear horses also, yeah, so that they can give in the band parties. So the cause of the community has overbearing over family honor and individual rights of the women. In a sense, like if the women doesn't want to go into the profession of prostitution, still she is forced into this profession by the community. Lack of alternative. I'm really sorry for the background noise. I have a 6-month-old toddler, so please excuse me for that. So, because of the lack of alternative skills and the prejudice and discrimination, they have very, limited options for employment. So ultimately, the women are forced into this profession. Along with sex work, Perna women continues to play traditional feminine roles like household work and child rearing. She is expected to do all the household chores like cooking, taking care of children, cleaning, everything apart from the profession she does outside of the house. The community also practices polygamy, which mostly is for economic reasons. Uh, there is a preference for son because having more sons will equate to having more daughter-in-laws. As I explained earlier, that daughter-in-laws of the family, Perna families, they indulged into prostitution soon after the wedding. I mean, soon after their marriage and having the first child, they enter this uh, profession. Marriage has a pure economic logic. Marital disputes, divorce, these are settled within the community. They have a very unique form of, unique manner in which they divorce. Like both the parties, the men and the husband and the wives parties, they break a stick into two parts, which signifies that the matrimonial alliance has been broken. So yeah, and then they have the local panchayat system in which the elders of the elderlies of the community, they are the decision makers, and they resolve all the disputes within the community only. And cases of domestic violence is also they are prevalent against these women. The dwellings lack proper sanitation and drinking water facilities. uh, there are like filthy alleys which are there are a heap of garbage dumped into the alleys, into the locality, Perna locality, which is very unhygienic. So then we have Bedia. So the Bedias trace their origins to a 16th century siege of Chittorgarh battle in which the Mughal forces defeated the Rajputs. So this forced them to adopt a nomadic lifestyle. At present, Bedias are settled in parts of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Jharkhand. Girls of the community are mainly illiterate. They have no skills, and they have to face enormous family pressure to join prostitution. Community sanctions the occupation, just like Perna. Here also the community plays a great role in pushing the women into this profession. Unlike the Pernas in Bedia community, the unmarried sisters are engaged in the profession. The eldest daughter of the family is supposed to take up this profession and earn the earn bread for the family. The women, as I explained, the mostly the eldest daughter of the community are introduced to the profession at a very early age. In Bedia community, an idle woman is one who selflessly provides for her family and kins. These Bedia settlements lack proper living facilities like school, sanitation, drinking water, etc. It's reported that they also lack important government documents. One thing I would like to mention about Pernas, that they have, just because they live in Delhi, they have proper documents such as Aadhaar, their voter IDs, ration cards. They have all these documents, but Bedias lack these government important government documents. Then we have Rajnuts. So the Rajnuts, it's a clan of nuts who are associated with the princely houses. Rajnut community of Rajasthan are mostly scheduled castes. They were previously engaged themselves as singers, dancers, players, and the entertainers of king zamindars. However, after the dissolution of monarchy in Rajasthan and the collapse of zamindari system, they were left landless and jobless. So they had to embrace sex work as the only source of livelihood. The involvement into commercial sex worker resulted in the vulnerability, deprivation, and marginalization of Rajnats. The young girls from the community were forcefully sent to join bar dance to other states like Mumbai at a very tender age of 14 to 15 years. Girls are not allowed to study more than 8th standard, as they may change their minds, or they may get influenced with the modern, education, and they might not accept this occupation. So they are not encouraged to study more. Rajnat community is found in some villages of Rajasthan, which are adjacent to the highways, as this accessibility attracts the easy flow of customers to the villages. Rajnath's perception and value system about sex is different from the normative pattern of high caste Hindus. Obviously, that's why they are indulged in these. Then we have Kanjars. So Kanjar is a nomadic community residing in the parts of Rajasthan, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, and Delhi. Children are usually educated by the parents. Many a times, girl child is even mortgaged for securing debt. Often these children end up in the vicious circle of prostitution. After marriage, a girl is not forced into the profession of sex work, but then they are they're asked to join bar dancing and everything. There's a customary sanction to the practice under the chhadi pratha. Punch consisting of the five village elders of the community often impose coercive fines against those who oppose the system. Bachra. Bachras are mostly settled in western part of Madhya Pradesh. The eldest daughter of the family usually becomes a prostitute and earns for the family. Khilwadis Khilwadis means the eldest daughter of the family. They all also command respect in the family and the community for their role. Sometimes party forces the younger daughter also to join the profession. Daughters are initiated to prostitution as soon as they attain puberty. Social event marks the attainment of puberty. The male members of the family often act as the pimp for these women. This is the profile of clientele. So with the general client, sex is just the penetrative sex for all these DNTs. Female sex worker avoids indulging in any other sexual activity except penetrative sex. The client too, after sex, wants to leave the place as soon as possible due to fear of police and just to protect his identity. General client, being unknown, does not develop any attachment to the sex workers and vice versa. Clients generally who are drunk and untidy, they are ignored by these sex workers. And kissing, fondling, and all these intimate gestures, they are meaningless, which are neither encouraged nor practiced with the clients. And oral and anal sex are neither practiced nor liked by the sex workers. If a client demands or approaches for oral or anal sex, the sex workers do not give it to their demands. A majority, 80% of the sex workers opposed oral and anal sex. Then there's a commonality between all these DNTs. Like the caste panchayat is a strong and effective political institution which ensures that the system is sustained. The prostitution, the profession of prostitution, there is sustained. I mean, it makes sure the caste panchayat. It perhaps requires rethinking in the changing scenario by the caste panchayat members and Panch, the social elite. It is equally important to emphasize that these women are sex workers, not by the social sanction of the caste panchayat alone, but by the society at large. It is more so due to the society, patriarchy, freedom to the males to have sex outside the family and caste, and the involvement of sex traders. So, apart from the their societal sanction, or we can say the sanction by the community, there are other factors which work all together to make their situation even vulnerable. The existing situation calls for the integration of these groups with the mainstream society to become the beneficiary of development and democracy. So after that we have over to you, ma'am. And
Yeah, so we have discussed the different aspects of the DNTs, different aspects of the societies of these DNTs who have indulged in prostitution. And uh, if time permits, we will just quickly, take a round of different theoretical perspectives that we have broadly used to analyze prostitution among the DNTs. So the first approach or the first theoretical perception that we can take is the functionalist theory, where we can talk about the functional aspect of prostitution in the society. So we can say that very, very briefly we will touch up these theories. So the functionalist theory if applied to prostitution, can explain that the prostitution is and a practice which is perpetuating in different parts of the world. Everywhere you find prostitution, and the reason for prostitution is that it brings revenue to many people, to the females who indulge in commercial sex work, and to the pimps who are involved. Here we will say that in the context of the DNTs indulging in prostitution, it brings about, it brings them a means of livelihood and some money on which they can sustain. So we can say that as in context of the Perna community, where the other deities, also reside, the economic condition of the Pernas is the best because they make a lot of money from commercial sex work, whereas the status, economic and social status of the economic status of the other DNTs residing in the neighborhood is not very good because they don't have their traditional occupation to live upon, and they are forced into beggary and wage work. That is one aspect. Second, we can say, the feminist conflict theory can be applied here, where we can say that the women are treated as the subordinated group and they are forced by the male members of the community or the family to indulge in prostitution. So even if the women from various families may not be, interested in going for commercial sex work, they are forced by the male members who dominate in the patriarchal system in these denotified tribes to go into prostitution. So even if they don't want to do it, they are forced to indulge in prostitution. Though changes are taking place, but still women are being forced, especially if we go by our, empirical study in the Perna, women are being forced into prostitution. Apart from that, we can analyze prostitution among the DNTs from the labeling theory perspective, where we can say that the dual labels of DNT and prostitutes are applied to the women indulging in prostitution, which leads to dual stigma. One, the DNTs already bear the stigma because of the prejudices held against them, that they indulge in criminal acts. So the administration around their area always looks at them with suspicion, and tries to monitor the activities of these communities. And if there is any incidence of crime or theft taking place in a particular area, the police picks up these denotified tribes as the first suspect. So that is one, impact of the label of DNT being applied to them, which kind of creates stigma over these communities. And the other aspect, that they indulge in prostitution, the label of prostitute also pushes the women especially and the entire community onto the margins, though it brings about economic upgrading of the community at the larger level. But the label of prostitution forces them at the periphery of the society, where we can say, like in the Perna, the area where we conducted our field work among the Perna, it was seen that the MCD, does not go into the area. The children of these communities are, treated with a lot of with a lot of. I mean, they are stigmatized even in the schools, where they are treated differently because they belong to a community where the entire community indulges in prostitution. So the dual labels of DNT and the prostitute has a severe impact, on these communities, which pushes them to the margins of the margin. And finally, we have tried to apply the subculture theory, where we can say that the mainstream cultural values which say that prostitution is an immoral act is kind of replaced by the subculture, which kind of justifies and perpetuates prostitution as a normal act. So when the children grow up in these communities seeing that the women indulge in prostitution and the men are okay with this act, they also grow up accepting prostitution as a normal practice, and they are kind of ready, they are socialized into this subculture, and they grow up seeing they grow up seeing that prostitution is normal, and so the women are trained to indulge in prostitution, and the males become kind of the persons who tend to perpetuate the system by forcing the women into prostitution. So basically, we have looked at the prostitution among the DNTs from these theoretical perspectives, and uh, we can conclude by saying that the prostitution among the DNTs is a very unique kind of phenomena, which, to my knowledge, to our knowledge, does not exist in any other part of the world. And the government authorities do not have any clue about this, because the studies which have been done on the prostitution among the DNTs are confined to academic circles. They have not been reported to the administration, to the various departments and ministries of the government. So we would try to, through academic discussions, we would try to bring out these issues of the women suffering among these DNTs, into the mainstream, and try to find solution to them. Over to you, Sulva. Let's conclude.
So sorry, I kept myself mute all the time just because of Tia.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that is what I was saying, that on this particular DNT, the women of Perina community. So we did a very good field work, extensive field work, and then we came to know about their plight, like how these women are indulged. I mean, literally forced into this profession.
Sulva?
And then in-laws, soon after their first delivery, I mean, as soon as they deliver their first child, they are forced into this profession. Around the age of 17, they are into this profession, so they are as good as if we go by the legal definition of children, they are children only. So basically, when we say women, then we have a picture an age of 18 or more than that. But these women, when we are talking about the women of Perna, who are being pushed into this occupation, they are literally children who are female children who are pushed into this occupation. Most of them they take entry into this profession when they are around 17 or say 16 years. So there are so many dimensions which have to be studied from an academic point of view. Though there are articles, and there is a very little mention of them in on it's high time we should do the serious that so that they can be brought into mainstream and they can be wean off from this this practice.
Yeah, so I
Hello,
think,
am I
yeah,
audible?
बीच बीच में your voice is going.
Yeah, even
So
I
anything,
lost you.
yeah. So, but we will conclude by giving a note of thanks for listening to us. We hope that our discussion brings some academic fervor, and we can have discussions at the international level and try to find some solutions to this problem of prostitution among the DNTs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.